me a promotion, so we'll have to talk about that later. But pleasure to be here. I think the topic is very relevant for where we see customers in the market space today. And if I can capture it correctly, automate the routine, focus on the amazing and strategies to transform and connect and protect your cloud. So I kind of live in that world today as I'm responsible for our cloud management products within VMware for the Americas. Not all aspects, but at least a good level of responsibility there. So I spend a fair amount of time talking to customers that are looking to try to innovate and move in the direction towards being a more agile, flexible environment that can adapt to the speed of the business demands that seem to be getting more and more aggressive as they come at us from an IT perspective. So just to help me get a better understanding of who I'm talking to, how many of you in the audience are in IT, run IT, associated with IT? All right. Aren't we lucky, right? So, boy, I've been in this industry for, I hate to say it, but 20 years, and really kind of focused around the data center space, and primarily around the enterprise management and automation of the data center space. And I got to tell you, I've seen more change in the last probably 3 to 5 years in terms of new innovation and disruption than I saw 10 years prior. Everybody seeing that same thing? Things are moving really fast. And trying to navigate that in terms of how we, continue to take full responsibility and deliver well on our core responsibilities, but also to tackle innovation and figure out how we adopt new things is not an easy task for anybody. So I'm going to steal a quote from Gartner that recently did a CIO survey to quite a significant amount of their customer base and came back with this quote: "My business and its IT organization have been engulfed by a torrent of digital opportunities we cannot respond to in a timely fashion, and this threatens the success of the business and the credibility of the IT organization." That's probably a little bit of a dramatic statement or a dramatic quote, but I think it hits on a few things. And I kind of break it down into areas where today I kind of look at them as divides or areas that we need to bridge for us to be able to take full advantage of the change and innovation that's happening in the marketplace. So we think about, and I'm sure you guys have talked plenty about development and ops, right? There's a big divide today between dev and ops. How do we help bridge that? As we think about on-prem, off-prem, how many of you are trying to figure out in the best way for your business how to rationalize where you run workloads and where you run applications and what's the best for your business? Fair amount, right? As we think about legacy, traditional application structures versus next-gen 12-factor cloud-native apps, and how do we balance that? What's interesting is, boy, if you read the trade magazines and the articles and stay in tune to what's being talked about in the industry, they talk a lot about new, right? Cloud native apps, 12-factor apps. There's a ton of energy and time being spent on that, less so on the legacy. So how do we balance that in a way that allows us to be able to move in the way that we want to? And lastly, I'd say, I think there's a divide today between IT and the business. The business has an insatiable appetite for more. They want the latest, they want it now, and they're expecting that we as IT folks are going to be able to deliver that in a reasonable time frame exactly the way they want it. So how do we balance those expectations, but also how do we gain more control in terms of the capabilities and the services we're able to offer to be able to augment or perhaps defer some of what's happening outside of our organizations from a shadow IT and services perspectives that are really being looked at because of timing versus really anything else. So it's kind of an overall balanced issue in terms of the things that we're responsible for managing today. You know, I'd look at it in terms of new expectations versus, oh, by the way, everything else that we have to do in order to run our businesses effectively, keep the lights on, have the right type of control, have the right type of security. How do you balance that? So we're being asked to be more strategic, but we're being asked to drive operational excellence at the same time, right? You guys hear this. We're being asked to quickly adopt new technology. And boy, there's a ton of it out there right now, between containers, between different application architecture and structures. I mean, there's a lot coming at us today. How do we align that to our shop that we're responsible for running? And obviously kind of rationalize our spending to be able to adopt that new technology, but at the same time, be able to keep everything else up and running as we so need. And by the way, how many of you have gotten a lot more IT budget over the last few years than you had previously? Anybody? Anybody out there has got more money? So, you know, how do we figure out the ways that we can, you know, rationalize through that process to be able to move forward? Boost innovation and stay secure. I mean, I've been here for 20 minutes and I've heard people talk about security, I think, 7 times. So this is a real issue today. And we're seeing examples out within, you know, the public forum in terms of companies that are quite candidly caught by surprise, or maybe they're not, right, if they really understand their security strategy and structure and their ability to be able to, you know, prevent things from happening. But there's a lot of, you know, more and more issues that are happening out there. So we got to be faster, right? We got to be more agile, but we have to still have the same amount of control and efficiency. And most often we're being asked to do it with less money. Pretty interesting dynamic, right? So Gartner continues to go on to say, and this is out of a recent, they had their data center, Gartner Data Center Conference in Las Vegas end of last year, where they did an online poll, kind of like you folks are doing today. And they came up with, you know, challenges to, for the audience to be able to have them identify the things that were of the biggest concern today. And what they came up with, or at least 30% of the audience came up with, was developing a public, private, and hybrid cloud strategy. Does that resonate here? Yeah? Okay. Interestingly enough, and I almost thought this would be higher when we think about modernizing legacy applications, but perhaps the former precedes the latter in terms of having a strategy that you can figure out how to manage around or pivot around that gives you a better insight in how you take your legacy applications with you, or at least balance that in an appropriate way. I'm going to skip this slide only because who in here wants to be a broker of IT services? Probably not me, but we've got some complexity in here as a service provider to our customers, whether they be internal or external. And we've got some interesting competition today that is happening or coming from areas that we didn't have 5, 10 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, but even, you know, as little as 3 to 5 years ago, we didn't have the same type of competition and pressure from an IT perspective that we do today. So, where am I? There we go. So how does VMware think about this? So my intent here is to have this not be a product pitch. So I'm not going to talk to you about product names and things. I'm going to really sit and kind of talk to you about how we're thinking about cloud computing today and what our strategy is with customers in helping them figure out how to migrate from yesterday and have a strategy and a plan that allows them to be effective going forward into the future. And with the following view, you know, it's interesting that we were just talking about mobile and virtualized desktop strategies and things like that, because in my opinion, our success and our grading card starts with our end users, whether they be internal or be external. You know, satisfaction in terms around what we provide ultimately is graded upon their experience and how they feel about things. So it starts with end users. And like all of us, how many of you today have an application, in your work world that is just not good? And you've developed strategies to go around that and, different ways to accomplish, whatever you're trying to get done without using that application. I'll even go out and admit this. I work for VMware. We've got some of those. So that experience is important to make sure that users are getting the value that they need to be able to help them be more productive in a timely fashion. So that user experience, whether it be at the desktop or the mobile device, I think is job number one. Around the applications and services that our customers depend upon to do their jobs. Those applications, whether they be a traditional legacy app or that they be a modern, traditional 12-factor cloud native type of application, or they be a traditional SaaS application where we license that as a service. All those applications depend upon infrastructure. And I realize infrastructure is not particularly the sexiest thing that we can talk about, but they're the underpinning of everything we do, right? So, and this is a particular area that VMware, in my opinion, has built a well-deserved reputation for innovation and disruption that transformed a marketplace around compute. So this is going to be a dumb question, but it'll be for a fact. How many of you have heard of a hypervisor? Everybody? How many of you have, well, let me ask that differently. How many of you have not heard of a hypervisor? Okay. How many of you heard of vSphere or haven't heard of vSphere? Okay? As I would expect. So collectively, by the introduction of an abstraction layer, right, a hypervisor, we have collectively saved customers like yourselves billions of dollars by enabling you to do more with less and not have such a strong requirement for physical infrastructure. So we're continuing to drive that same type of innovation and disruption across the entire infrastructure stack. So not just compute, but also at the network and security layer, or software-defined networking with the solution we refer to as NSX. And at the storage layer with a solution that we've referred to as vSAN. In essence, we're extending that abstraction layer across the entire infrastructure stack. So this alone would be market changing. If we think about the flexibility, agility, pick your favorite industry description here, just being able to do that and the time it can save for you folks to be able to provision and manage the applications and services that you need, this is market changing by itself. But to get to our vision of a software-defined data center, it all has to be brought together through management and automation. Especially when you consider the advantage of enabling customers to be able to abstract, pool, and control their entire infrastructure stack, but also to manage your workloads, your applications, on any platform. So whether that be private, whether it be public, or it be hybrid in between, which is where we think the marketplace is going today. All through a common set of solutions and tools, consistent across both sides. So how do we accomplish this? So through a solution set that differs from legacy IT management solutions, in that it was purpose-built from the ground up over the last 5 years, specifically to deal with the dynamic nature of cloud workloads, infrastructure, and platforms. We have built-in predictive analytics and machine learning that provide the true automation and operations capabilities required for true cloud management. We manage the health, risk, efficiency, and compliance of your cloud infrastructure, your workloads, and obviously your platforms. And we do that in a way that is a combination of both structured and unstructured data to be able to give you the insight in terms of how your environment is operating today so you can make educated decisions about what you need going forward, not only to fix problems, but in terms of how you support your growing needs with your environment. We provide on-demand access to any service through automatically delivering applications, infrastructure, and desktop as a service. And then I think equally important, we provide complete transparency into the cost and the quality of the services that you deliver as an IT organization. So giving you the insight to be able to understand not only how's my environment working, but am I properly utilized? Do I have proper capacity to support things that are coming in the future? But also, where's the best environment for me to go place my workloads or my applications? So for example, could be Amazon, right? Could be, could be Microsoft, could be Google, could be VMware. But based upon the dollars and cents and the quality of service that you need to be able to have that insight, to be able to make business decisions based upon real data. And even to think forward in terms of you've got a new environment that you need to build or you're spinning up a new application, based upon your true costs of what it costs for you to acquire whatever those components are, what does that look like going forward? So what-if scenarios, which we're finding very interesting today because it gives customers the ability to look at what-if scenarios around if I'm going to further virtualize my environment, which is, fewer and fewer today based upon where the maturity in the virtualization market is. But if I'm going to balance my needs between hardware-defined networking and software-defined networking, what does that get me in terms of cost, but also quality of service? Same goes for storage. If I've got bringing on new applications, what type of storage do I need? And how do I balance that between software-defined storage versus typical hardware-defined storage type of profiles? So ultimately, at the end of the day, we provide an environment that allows you to operate at the speed of the way that cloud is moving today in a very dynamic world with a few tenets. We think that everything should be automated, but with the appropriate policy and governance required to be able to effectively control your environment. We think there's got to be collaboration and self-service. I mean, we look at the world today in terms of development and ops and what development is demanding in terms of instant access to whatever it may be. So we think that environment is healthy from a collaboration perspective, but we also think it needs to have the proper governance and policy built into the core. And naturally, continuous optimization and remediation is kind of table stakes to making sure that the environment that you're running today is as optimized as it can be. So VMware is not just for VMware. This gives you a view in terms of our heterogeneous capabilities. We understand that your worlds are not just one vendor. We understand the sensitivity today around the concept of lock-in and being all in with one vendor. So we've taken that to heart across our entire product line to make sure that we give customers choice, but we give you a cohesive strategy and a solution stack to be able to align to your needs. So whether it's across compute, network, and storage, we'll give you that flexibility and still incorporate it into the common tenets of what we've talked about in terms of true cloud management. I'm going to skip this. It talks a little bit about market share that is probably not important to you folks, and go to some questions.
Let's give Jay a great big hand. Big hand for Jay, everybody. Good job. I didn't know you'd be done already. All right. As Jay said, let's go to some questions then. Let's see. Show of hands. Who has a question for Jay? First question gets a shirt. I got to get rid of some of these shirts. Who? First hand up. Jay, help me look around.
Can I help
Wins
you get a shirt?
Yes. There's got to be a hand up here somewhere. Really? All right, how about we quiz the audience, and whoever can answer something from your thing. Can you think of something that you talked about that we can give them a little quiz, and whoever gets it right first grabs a shirt?
Let me think of a good question.
Yeah,
here.
think of a good question there. Let's have a little fun.
I mean, we talked about kind of the 4 gaps that at the beginning of my presentation that we're trying to work through. Development, ops, on-prem, off-prem, legacy apps, new. For you guys, what's the biggest, of those, what is the biggest challenge you're working with today?
Yes, sir.
I have a question for him regarding the roadmap to, as a customer, what are the challenges that they're facing to go from a monolithic data center to a software-defined data center? Mm-hmm. What are the challenges that they're encountering?
That's a good question. So ultimately, I think it comes down to, and Todd was up here earlier talking about use cases. And where we look at implementing a software-defined data center, we have customers that have tried to do this in a number of different ways. Certainly an all-in enterprise strategy where you start to incorporate these technologies, from the ground up. But we also see great success in customers looking at it from an application or a workload centric view. In fact, for if any of you that attended VMworld last week, we announced a new product called Evo SDDC, which is a hyper-converged infrastructure stack with all the components of our software-defined data center, so compute, network storage, as well as the management and automation, all installed, shipped to customers on a piece of infrastructure, hyper-converged infrastructure from a number of different partners. Right now we're looking at Dell, we're looking at VCE, we're looking at a number of others that we've gone to them and said, based upon this configuration from a software perspective and what the customers are trying to do, these are the minimum hardware requirements that are required to be able to run this suite of software and the workloads and the applications that would run on those effectively. And what we're describing here from a software-defined data center, I would never say it's easy, but taking kind of a app-centric or workload-centric approach to it gives customers the ability to be able to pick an app or pick a set of workloads and then scale from there once they get traction. Any other questions?
Anything else before we let him go? All right, you guys talk
Thank
to
you.
him later on. Give him a great big hand.